Hey guys, welcome back to Honey in the Rock, episode 77. I'm Sophie, and today my special guest is Lindsay. Thanks for coming on.
I'm so excited. Thanks for having me.
We just recorded an episode on her podcast, so whenever she launches it, I'll make sure I tag it on my Instagram. Y'all go listen to hers. But it was so fun, and I was like, it's kind of fun to be on this other side of the chair, and I didn't have to think about what I was going to say next. I just got to hang out. So thanks for letting me join yours.
Absolutely.
And thanks for coming on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So actually, I know you know this, but I don't know if you know this part. So right before I started the podcast, I was praying about it, Lord, I think you said you want me to start a podcast. I don't really know about that. And then I was like, well, I don't have a computer. If I don't have a computer, I can't have a podcast. That was my excuse for myself. When I told my mom that, I was like, if I don't have a computer, I can't start a podcast. And then literally the next day, Lindsay was like, I'll sell you my computer for $50. And I'm like, okay, God, I guess I'm starting the podcast. So I started with your computer, and now I have a new computer. But I'm sure the Lord would have kept tugging on my heart. But since you decided to sell your computer, I started the podcast earlier. So thanks for selling your computer.
Oh my gosh, that's such an amazing story. Only God, right? Only God.
No, isn't that fun? Because it was okay, well, I'm not gonna spend all my money right now on a computer.
All the reasons and excuses.
Yes, excuses, and excuses. And then I was like, okay, well, I can buy a $50 computer. I guess I'm gonna do it.
The excuses, and then God says, well, what about this? And you go, well, okay.
Okay, God. So now we're here. And so I know I keep saying thank you, but thanks for being on. And we're just going to dive right into your testimony. So Lindsay's going to share a testimony, and I'm just going to chime in when I think of something.
Awesome. Okay.
So start wherever you want.
Well, as I told Sophie, my testimony is very loaded. It is long, so I will try to be brief, but you can stop me and ask questions anytime. Right. So I was actually raised in a very broken and abusive home. My mom had married my father, which was her second husband, and they were divorced by the time I was 1. Okay. So from about my age, from 1 to 6, my mom had different boyfriends. There was drugs. There was abuse. Yeah. My grandparents, my first exposure to God was, I do remember my grandfather would come pick me up in his station wagon and take me to Sunday school at First Presbyterian. So it was a very fancy kind of church. Yep. And my mom married her third husband. I was 5 years old, and he was a very abusive alcoholic. So I spent 10 years in that environment. My mom was a Christian. She, as a matter of fact, we would leave in the night, after a drunken episode, and we would go to different houses and Christian homes. And so I had exposure. Yeah. As a matter of fact, there was one time where we had gone and escaped, and we were staying somewhere. I can't even. The memory is so vague. Yeah. But I remember being at this church, and it was a very loud church, and I could feel, and it was the kind with the altar call, almost like a New Spring back in the 80s. Right. And I repeated the prayer, and I must have been 9 years old, maybe. Yeah. And so I feel but I also questioned God a lot because of my home environment. Right, yeah. Because my grandparents lived in town, and I was never taken out of that environment until I was 14, when another episode happened, and it was an episode where I literally went to my mom and said, if you do not leave him, because my 2 older siblings had already left. Okay. They had already said, we are not going to stick around in this house anymore, and they went and lived with their fathers. So at 14 years old, I went to my mom and said, if you do not leave him, I'm going to leave. And it was finally the wake up call that she needed. Yeah. Now, granted, she feared for her life. She absolutely, it's not like she stayed because she wanted to. Right. There was massive threats of him killing her, killing all of us if she ever left. Yeah. But I think it was, so at 14 years old, when he left, finally, and he was gone for good, and we spent 6 months living in massive fear that he was going to come back and kill all of us. Right. But he actually, in my opinion, as a 14-year-old, went away with his tail kind of tucked between his legs. Yeah. And we never saw him again. And so at 14, my brain then started processing that I became very angry at my mom. I blamed her for the years that we spent in this, and I became a very rebellious teenager.
Yeah.
And, I really had no relationship with God. I think if you would have asked me, I would have said, yeah, I'm a Christian, because I prayed that prayer once.
Well, and that's what felt right.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it's different sides, and like sometimes it's like it's cool to be a Christian, so it's like, yeah, I was a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a little bit, to go back a little bit to like the praying the prayer part, is there's a little bit of fear almost involved in
Absolutely.
that, of like, wait, do you actually want to have a personal relationship with Jesus and like ready to ride the highs and lows with him? Sometimes doubts, sometimes really good. Like, are you ready to be in a relationship with him, or is this like a fear thing?
Absolutely.
And so like now, even when some little kids that I know are like, I believe in Jesus, or even teenagers just like, oh, did you pray a prayer, or did you accept Jesus into your heart? Like, there is a difference, and there is power in praying a prayer, yes, but if your heart's not in it, then.
And I would tell you that my heart wasn't, because it was more, I remember specifically feeling like, well, I don't want to go to hell.
Right.
Yes. So if I pray this prayer. Yeah. And so I spent, from 14, I spent several years, I became a very rebellious, angry teenager that really, I wanted to honestly hurt my mom. I wanted to get back at my mom. As a 14-year-old brain, my brain could not comprehend or understand her reasons for staying and putting our family the way it was. And so I wanted to almost punish her.
Yeah.
And then I spent years trying to fill all the void inside of me. So I was abused. I was neglected. My mom had 2 other children with him. And she spent, much time nursing her wounds or caring for the babies. And so I was neglected and abused. And I spent years, I developed eating disorders because it was the only thing I could control, actually, while he was still in our home. Yeah. And I spent years filling the void inside of me with drugs, with drinking, trying to drown the pain, all of that. Which, as you and I both know as believers now, that hole can only be filled with Jesus.
Oh yeah.
And growing up the way I grew up, I did not know how to love. I did not know how to show love. I did not know how to receive love, accept love. I honestly never even wanted to get married. As a teenager, I was like, I'm never getting married. No one's going to control me. You? Exactly. Yeah.
Especially like seeing stuff. It's like, well, why would you put yourself back in there? That's hard. Okay. I want to go back a little bit to this idea of like filling a void, which honestly everyone struggles with, whether that's, before you find that real relationship with Jesus, you're feeling it. Sometimes it's just on social media, scrolling. But you said you kind of went into an eating disorder to feel control. When did you figure out that you weren't in more control? Like, when do you think that switched?
Well, so I would tell you about 6th grade. So about 11 years old, I guess, was when I first started not eating food, like trying to, and I wouldn't call myself anorexic, but I, as an abusive stepfather, it would be, eat your peas. You can't get up from this table until you finish your everything on your plate. Right. And so I would be forced to finish my plate, which that's also a parent of the 80s. Right. So at lunch, at school, or anywhere else, I would just not eat. I would be like, you can tell me, this was the only thing that I could control. And so it really truly was like, you're not watching me, so I'm not going to eat. Right. Okay. And then I, as a young girl, I was always a little, not heavy, but I was, you always think, you look in the mirror and you think, I'm not as small as she is. Right. Yeah. And I began losing weight and I began getting attention. So that then filled a void for me because people were noticing even, well-meaning adults would say something and didn't realize, like, because I was getting attention of, like, I was an athlete, and I can't even remember some of the things that they would say, but it made me feel like, oh, I'm seen. Right. I'm seen. Oh, yeah. And I'm seen now because I'm not eating and I've lost some weight. So I'm going to keep doing this. So it was filling a void of needing, because I was neglected to feel. Goodness, that's so hard. Yeah. And so then I continued with that battle, that struggle, until I was about 16. Okay. So I left home at 16. Okay. I moved out. I left my house. My mom and I were at a place where, I was just an awful, awful person at this point. I just, was so mad at the world. I was mad. I don't think I was even mad. And you kind of had reasons to be mad too. Like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And and my mom, I was like, Mom, you can't control me either. I was just and so I left home and tried to fill all the voids. And then I had a boyfriend, my very first boyfriend at 16, and he broke my heart, of course. Right. And I immediately switched from starving myself, because I was only eating one meal a day, to, well, why am I doing this? You know? And so I started filling the void with food. And so I would binging, and then I was vomiting. And so then I became bulimic, and I struggled with that. I actually struggled with bulimia on and off for about 2 years, 16 to 18, also with drugs, and just trying to kill the pain. Fill the void and kill the pain.
And what's hard about those things is like it temporarily will fill the void. And so, I mean, everything of the world will fill this void for time being. Maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 10 minutes, but you're doing that thing to get that instant feel good. Okay, I just had this drug. Now I'm going to be good for 2 days. Let me go. Or, oh, I'm going to get control back, so I'm not going to eat, or I'm going to eat all of this, or I'm going to go smoke, or I'm going to drink, or I'm going to scroll on Instagram all night. But then eventually it's going to, and it does numb, and it does fill void temporarily. But then it leaves you more empty, which is even harder.
Absolutely. And so, you know, fast forward several years, I actually, at 18 years old, got myself clean. No more drugs. I was done with that part of my life and got myself clean, which is a miracle in itself. But I still, you know, did not want to get married. I wanted to have a big career in New York, you know, and that kind of thing. But as God has bigger plans and better plans for us, he brought a man into my life, and this man was incredible. He came from a wonderful home. He fell in love with me. He treated me so well. I didn't know how to handle that or receive the love. We actually got married at a very young age, but our problems started very early on because I didn't know how to receive the love, and I didn't know how to give love.
Right.
And his love scared me. It scared me so much. I mean, after 1 year of marriage, I was like, what am I doing? Why are we married? Like, you know, and I pushed him away, and we separated. And then we got back together. You know, it was, so we separated, and I was hanging out partying again with all the girls, you know, my very early 20s, and, you know, again, trying to fill those voids. And God put on my heart, I know this now, I didn't realize it then. I just kind of woke up one day and was like, what am I doing? Like, all these friends that I'm hanging out with are looking for the man that I said go away to. You know, like, this is an incredible man, and why did I push his love away? And so I, you know, luckily he forgave me, and we got back together, and we had 2 beautiful children, and the devil came right back into me. You know, again, I hadn't dealt with the childhood trauma. I was again, we were going to church occasionally. I would have called myself a Christian, but I did not have healing. I did not have forgiveness, and I did not have a relationship with Jesus. And so again, at 33, 31, I did the same thing. I pushed my husband away again after 2 kids. And, you know, all the trauma and everything that I tried to make myself happy. Anyway, I pushed him away again, and I was a divorced mom with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. He had moved to Chicago. We stayed in Greenville, South Carolina. And I had so much anger. So much anger. And I'll tell you, I found Jesus. Well, Jesus pursues us.
Found you.
Right? Jesus pursues us. And there were so many incredible women around me and in my life who were praying for me. And I'll be honest with you, I had a couple of them tell me at that time, we're praying for you. And I thought to myself, don't pray for me.
Right.
I don't need your prayer.
No.
Why? I don't, you know, and I didn't say that, but.
And you're like, I got it.
Yeah.
I'm good. Yeah.
I'm in control of my life. Because that was what I craved so much was control.
Right.
And so I was watching a movie one night. It was actually 13 Going on 30. If you're familiar with Jennifer Garner. I loved her. My girls were upstairs asleep, and I was watching a movie. It was a Sunday night. And there was a scene in the movie where Jennifer, who is, you know, 13, but she's 30 living in the city. She is so upset at being an adult. She takes the train home, and she falls into her parents' arms. They open the door, and she just falls into her parents' arms, and they're like, you know, comforting her and loving her. And I broke. I literally sat there in my living room and absolutely just broke because I, as a child, never had that. And all I ever wanted was to give that to my children. I never wanted to get married and have kids in the first place. But of course, God changed my heart when he put this perfect man in my life. Not perfect, but wonderful man in my life. And so I had this family, and all I wanted was to give them the childhood, the love, the security that I never had. And so I fell to my knees, and I just started bawling. And I just started praying and asking God to forgive me for the way that I've lived my life, all of those things. And literally he instantly changed me.
Goodness,
I mean,
I just got chills.
instantly changed everything about me. And that's the moment I became a Christian. I was at 33 years old.
That is so cool. And then where are you now? Because we'll go back to that, but I feel like you can't leave the cliffhanger.
Yes. Well, I mean, obviously, God changed everything for me. And I've been through a lot of help. I've been through a lot of trauma therapy. I have had massive forgiveness for the adults in my life who did not protect me, who neglected, abused, and did not protect me, and healing through that. And I have forgiveness for them, which has, obviously allowed me to heal.
Yeah.
I still have trouble being loved and knowing how to love, but God is absolutely using my story. He is using my pain to share with others. I mean, not many people know that I'm a high school dropout. I mean, I dropped out of high school and I did get my GED. I was accepted to other colleges. I did go to college. I never finished because after having the experience that I had in my life, I couldn't hang out with college kids who had no problems.
Right. Yes, literally, yes.
Or that's the way I thought.
Felt, yeah. But now you're married.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Cliffhanger.
Yes,
that's what you meant. Yes.
And have a kid.
Yes.
Another kid.
Exactly. Okay. Sorry. That was the part.
No, but that was a good part. No, because I'm going back to the trauma part when you're done with
okay. Yeah. So God absolutely changed me. I mean, it took, a while of healing, but God literally changed my heart so much and told me. I've actually heard God's voice audibly twice in my life. And one time was when I was begging God for, what am I supposed to do now? My ex-husband lives in Chicago. God changed my heart so much. He said, this place in your life and this place in life, your place in this life is with your husband. But we were divorced. Right. And he had a girlfriend and he changed my heart so much. But I thought it's too late, and I remember being so mad at him at this point and talking to my mom on the phone and going, why did God do this? Why did God change me? If he was going to change me, why now? Right. We're divorced. He has a girlfriend. Yes. But of course, God's timing is always perfect.
He's got a little sense of humor. Yeah. He's like, watch this, girl.
Yes. So, and truth be told, my husband had been burned twice. And for him to have healing and forgiveness and allow me back in, again, only God. I mean, he came home from Chicago to visit and he immediately recognized the change. And again, it was God, right? All God. And so yes, we got back together. We got remarried by Gary Chapman. If you know who Gary Chapman is, that's another fun part of our story, who wrote the 5 Love Languages. Yep. He remarried us. And then we ended up having another child. Well, I wanted another child. I always wanted 4. Yep. And he was like, no. But and that's another beautiful God story. But we named her Holland Grace because only God's grace would allow us to be back together and to have this beautiful child.
Girl. Okay, that's so sweet. And it's really cool now to know you. Like, I love to know people's stories because it puts so many other things into perspective. And then it probably also now changes the way, like, you're a mom to teenage girls, which I'm sure is so hard. I can't imagine what my mom does to deal with me, but like to be a mom to teenage girls and now be like, wait, I want to love you so much because I wasn't felt that. And then the idea of like breaking down childhood trauma, because if you don't, it's going to be just like what you said. You're going to, have to get divorced, or you're not going to know how to love, or you're going to, these things are going to be hard and you have to work through that trauma. But it's really cool to see how the Lord like restored that and also created tools to help, like to be able to create, oh, this is the type of therapy, or this person's a good person to talk to, or things like that, to be like, let's break this down so you can love others and love God well, which is really cool.
Yeah. And it's the shame. I mean, I just recently started telling people because God has now, we have a very similar mission. God has laid on your heart of, obviously being this incredible young Christian woman to share your faith very boldly. And God has clearly showed me through my healing over the last 3 years that my place or my, he wants me to share my story and to be bold. And so over the last 2 years, no one knew that I was a high school dropout. The shame of that. Yeah. I told this fake story that I went to college in Boston and New York, and yes, I did, but I just never finished the story that I didn't graduate, and I never, but I realized that God can change so many more people through sharing that, yes, I was a high school dropout, but look at what he's done with my life. Yeah. And I don't recommend that for anyone. Stay in school. But the shame that I carried of that with that. And, but now I know that he uses that shame and uses that pain for purpose.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. There's purpose in the pain. And then that gives us hope, because if there wasn't purpose in the pain, then it's just pain. And then the idea of shame, like breaking down the shame and being like, actually, it's okay. Some of these things I couldn't control. I couldn't control what my childhood was like. But now this is what I can do with it. And it's really sweet to see now what you're doing and like through your work and all different things like that. It's really sweet to see. And then also like not putting yourself, or even to the listeners, not putting yourself not on a pedestal, not like, don't put other people on a pedestal. Even like, it was probably easy for you to do that with your husband. Like, oh, well, he was the one who was perfect in the relationship. It was me. Well, no, it was a hard thing for both of you. Like, it's not that he's on a pedestal and you're not. And I think that's a really important thing for everyone to keep in mind of like, maybe you're bringing in trauma and pain, but that doesn't mean you're the complete problem. Now, we got to work on our issues, but I think that's interesting. Something else to look at.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And shame will keep you stuck. And the enemy wants you to stay stuck. The enemy wants you to stay stuck in shame. The enemy wants you to believe that your shame is all other people see. And it's just not true.
No.
It's just
the Lord is just going to restore.
Yes.
And wipe that away.
Yeah.
That is so sweet. Well, thanks for sharing. Do you have anything else do you want to say?
You know, I think that for me, it's powerful because it's powerful for me to tell people that, yes, I was a high school dropout. Yes, I abused drugs in my teenage years, because I think that there are so many broken people out there that think that they're just going to stay in the pit.
Yeah.
And when you share, when somebody might look at me now and think, oh, she came from money, she went to college, she, whatever. Yeah. And that the whole reason I started sharing in the first place was I never wanted someone to look at me and be like, oh, I can't do what she's doing.
Right.
I wanted someone to realize only God is why I do, because I don't have advantages, you know, and for people, there are so many people out there that are broken and they hide in their shame and don't realize they think that they're the only ones that have, that they're telling themselves these lies from the enemy. And so I just think God has told me that my story is powerful to share with other people who are also struggling with shame for whatever reason, that you don't have to be stuck in that shame, that God does redeem, God does restore.
Yeah. And like, even in marriage, like, it's not like you're stuck in this generational curse of like, this is what my parents do, this is what I'm doing as a parent, or this is what my mom went through as a wife, so this is what I'm going to have to go through. But it's like, no, it doesn't have to be like that. And it's cool to see, like, now you're this first generation of like, okay, let's bring it. Yeah. So that's so cool. Yeah. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes.
It's been an honor.
It's been so fun. I like was reading your story, but then it's even sweeter to like hear you talking. Like, it's like, oh, it's like from your voice. Like, you can read something, but the emotion, I guess, maybe. I don't know. Sure. Well, thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much.
And thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye, guys.